Hi, folks. I'm Kima HIV prevention specialist at the Hartford Gay and Lesbian Health Collective. Health Collective is located at 1841 Broad Street in the south end of Hartford. And today I have Sharon Glassburn, LMFT, on our Zoom call today to talk about mental health issues in the bisexual community. It is Bisexual Health Awareness Month, and we know bi erasure is like a big thing, so we want to make sure that not only we acknowledge it now, but it's important to acknowledge all the time and avoid address bi erasure and address bisexual health as well as all the other LGBTQ groups we serve. So, Sharon, can you please introduce yourself and talk about your background and your work?
I can. Hi, I'm Sharon. Like Kim said, I'm an LMFT, which stands for Licensed Marriage and Family Therapist. I currently live and am practicing in Chicago, but I used to live in the Hartford area and worked in practice there, serving the queer community. And I primarily right now see individuals, but even then I'm working with a relational lens. As the license name implies, I am trained to work with family systems, with relational systems, and I really, really love that work. At this point, most of the folks I work with identify as some sort of sexual minority.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Sharon. And thanks for being on with us.
Yeah, I'm excited to be. I think it speaks to bi erasure maybe that I found out from you that it was Bisexual Health Month.
That's okay. It's my job to know, so.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so what initially got you interested in LGBTQ mental health?
Sure. I mean, I'm bisexual myself. I'm one of the folks who was lucky to kind of notice and be out since age 15. So more than half my life at this point, less than half my life. That's how time works. And I went into my program when I was applying for graduate school knowing that I was going to be working around sort of like hetero, sexist, normative models of family structures. And I really wanted to be able to confront that.
Awesome. Yeah, no, you're totally right. And I mean, it's an underserved community, so it's really great that you are so interested in it. So compared to the rest of the LGBTQ community, do you find that bisexual folks tend to face different mental health obstacles than other groups?
Definitely. I could talk about this forever. And as a quick aside, I'm going to be using bisexual as an umbrella term to encompass like different bi and bi adjacent identities. So some different terms I've used and know about are pansexual, polysexual, omnisexual. People feel really strongly about the language they use for their own sexual identities a lot of the time. And that makes sense. But for the purposes of this talk, I'm going to be using bisexual mostly, and I'm in full support of transcending the gender binary and all of that. So I'm of two minds, maybe appropriately. I really want to be able to paint bisexuality in all of its complexity in like a positive light, because narratives about groups can be powerful, but like really it's a mixed bag. Bisexual folks are more likely than both straight and gay and lesbian groups or identified people to experience negative mental health outcomes. There's a lot there. I remember this was true back when I attended a conference about LGBTQ health disparities back in 2012 here in Chicago. But then I also found a study from just last year confirming the same thing. This is from last year by Chan, Aparicio, and Mack. Bisexual individuals, they have higher levels of depressive and anxiety symptoms than lesbians and gay men. And then as a group, bisexual individuals are more likely to report identity uncertainty, to conceal their sexual orientation, and to have a weaker sense of connection to the LGBT community, which are can be huge resiliency factors when they're, not present. Oh, I lost your audio, Kim.
No, it's fine. I think that part of what you said kind of leads to the topic of bi erasure, like not feeling like they fit into the LGBTQ community as often. So can you talk a little about that?
I can. Oh gosh. Bi erasure, like you said, is this phenomenon that happens when people assume people in relationships with same genders as partners are straight, people in relationships with different genders as partners are gay or lesbian. It's real and it's super painful. I think I told you already, I wanted to make a joke about your organization name, like really playfully, because of how hard it can be for bisexual people to figure out how they fit into like the larger queer community. Like I have a client who is a cis woman partnered with a cis man, and she felt really awkward at an LGBT families event that was hosted pre-COVID. Some other examples of bi erasure that show up. Like I have a friend who, he is a gender fluid but male identified person who is married to a cis woman, and upon their marriage felt like he was sort of indoctrinated into this old boys club that talks a lot to him about like how to be with a woman, how to treat a woman. And he has a super queer, really sexually diverse background, and it felt like, you know, lots of gains in one way. Obviously, he was choosing to marry with someone in hopes of brightening his life, but a loss of that queer identity and like queer community in a big way. And I am also thinking about just ideas like a girls' night can feel like this is my big one, because I'm like a cis woman, like a cis-ish woman. When I get invited, and I'm always thankful for the invites, but when I get invited to things like girls' nights, it implies sometimes that community between women is a space like devoid of sexual interest, that it's a safe vacuum, and it can feel strange. It can feel like placing people in a, again, like very heterosexist and monogamy oriented box.
Yeah, no, I totally feel that. I just want to let you know your every time you move, there's like a static sound.
Thank you. Okay, I think it's my mic is right here, and I talk with my hands a lot. I will keep them here.
Okay. But yeah, no, I totally see what you're saying there. Cause yeah, girls' nights, quote unquote, in that sort of space are meant to be, I mean, not that if they have women who love women in them, they're not safe spaces, but they aren't necessarily the kind of completely desexualized space that is assumed if it's all straight. Do you know what I'm saying?
Exactly.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's what you're. So we did get a comment from Sherry Lucas that some lesbian and bi groups are only cool with bi women if they're with a woman,
That is
which
so real.
kind of tracks what you're saying.
I have felt that, and a lot of it's internalized. I don't know that externally I have received it in an aggressive way, but one of my most significant partnerships was with another cis woman, and when our relationship ended and I was in a partnership with a cis man, I felt like I had lost some of that identity and sense of belongingness. So it's like a layered experience. It's like you're not just like experiencing the loss of the relationship, you're experiencing often that loss of community. And it definitely, I don't want to say it's on both sides, but there's this deep, almost distrust from often lesbian and queer women, of bisexual women. And I was thinking about other like problematic narratives that men who are bisexual or out as bisexual are just transitioning into a gay identity.
Yeah, that's definitely something I've heard a lot from, especially when I was like younger, either because there was less acceptance like 10 years ago, or because I was in high school and people say silly things in high school.
All of it. Absolutely. I think both of those things happen quite a bit, and there's just this like lack of willingness to give bisexually identified people credit as the experts on their own sexualities. And I also think that those things do sometimes happen. I think that sometimes cis women are experimenting with women and then decide it's not for them. And sometimes men use a bisexual identity marker like while they're exploring their identity. But all in all, it feels like a big form of harassment
Oh yeah.
and abuse of bisexual people.
You can't tell somebody what their identity is.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So how do you think the non-LGBTQ community, so like straight cis folks, how do you think they stigmatize the bisexual community?
Well, there's this idea that you have to pick a side.
Ooh.
I think that I ironically was like once accused by a woman who eventually came out as bi herself that, you know, bisexual people are greedy, or that if you identify that way, you're greedy and you can't just settle. I think that when it's a cis man, sometimes there's this idea that it somehow takes away from masculinity. And I mean, we could talk for hours on that alone. Or if women identify that way, that it's just a sexual thing, it gets really fetishized.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I could name countless other examples. Those are some of the first ones that come to mind.
Now, how do you think bisexual folks are stigmatized by mental health providers?
That one was I was thinking about that specifically in the mental health context. And I have a sense about it in the greater health community, but when it comes to mental health providers, I think that sometimes folks aren't asking, like they're just assuming based on the identity of a partner that someone is with. If they're talking about a relationship with someone with a particular gender identity, assuming the person is cisgender, which isn't always,
Right.
not often the case, just making an assumption that speaks to the totality of who they're attracted to. Yeah.
And okay, do you think that bisexual mental health professionals experience stigma from other professionals?
That's an interesting question too. I'm probably the wrong person to ask about this, because at this point, so much of my mental health community and the folks I like consult with, the folks I refer to, are themselves queer or bi identified. And I'm actually in the middle of, I'm a long-term candidate or a data point in this longitudinal study about bisexual women and mental health. So I think that there's space, but I think it's similar to what happens on, like, if folks are in therapy, what happens on the client side, that people make assumptions. If you show up to an event with someone who presents a certain way, people assume that that's what you're into.
All right. So back to mental health for bisexual folks. What are some contributors? I mean, I know you talked about some of them, but what are some contributors to the mental health disparities that we see for bisexual folks?
Yeah. I think about like the lack of community spaces that are specific to the bisexual community. And I said I live in Chicago. It's still true in a huge city that right now under COVID there used to be a bisexual women's support group. That's not happening right now, and a queer women's group might look differently. Like people might show up differently in that space. I think about other things that contribute being, and I'm not saying this to throw shade on safe spaces. I think they're important, but I think there can be a lot of queer gatekeeping that happens. And I also want to acknowledge there can be privilege. There is privilege, perhaps, in being able to pass if you're in a straight presenting relationship. But it's at a huge cost. Like it's at the expense of perhaps like acceptance by the greater LNG community. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, no, definitely.
In the way you were, okay.
So you're saying it's kind of like a mixed bag there.
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right. So you said you were participating in a big study on bisexual women, and I mean, we know that bisexual folks are often overlooked in research. Like when I do presentations on bisexual health and LGBTQ health, it's a lot harder to find stats on bisexual health than other groups. So do you find this to be the case in the mental health field? And also, what kind of data do you think that we need to get?
Interesting. I mean, I can tell you what I would be interested to read and mix that, whether it's useful or not. I mean, speaking to the first part, I read recently that bisexual people are much less likely to disclose to their healthcare provider that that's their identity. And so, yeah, obviously there's a lack of medical research there. Personally, I would be curious about how relationships present for bisexual people at different points in the lifespan. So for example, in my own community, even though I know a ton of cis women who do not want children, I have personally found, and this is anecdotal, I'm doing the thing with the mic again, I think, that there are less bisexual cis women partnered with other women during perhaps like peak childbearing years. Again, that might not be true in everyone's community. And then I think with cis men, this can go in the opposite direction, that they might have more protection socially and emotional fortitude perhaps later in life to defy like heterosexist expectations from the community, from their family, than they might in their teens, for example. That's all speculation on my part. I'd be really curious about what is actually found, and I'd also be open to other interpretations and narratives of those phenomena.
Awesome. Okay, so how do you think that mental health professionals or healthcare professionals in general can better advocate for bisexual people and also to be more inclusive in their practice?
Yeah, I feel like even in the context of this call, my language has not been as inclusive as I want it to be, or I feel like I'm speaking to a binary a lot of the time. I mean, ask, even if it's clunky, even if it's more syllables, find ways to work he, she, they, and partner into your routine questions to see what comes up. Do a thorough job in like examining social community belongingness. Like, does someone feel like they fit into a larger group? Do they feel like they have community resources they can access? And then like do a good job assessing for other factors that help folks be socially and emotionally resilient too.
Yeah, I think a big one that I specifically, but we at Health Collective think is important is to never assume things. And I know you mentioned not assuming, but like not assuming that if somebody's with a woman, for example, that they are a particular sexual orientation, and to not, I mean, always we say don't assume people's pronouns and stuff like that. But I think that's a big part of bisexual erasure is just making assumptions.
Absolutely. And I think on the other side of that, you can feel when someone's prescribing or projecting a script onto you. And at least myself, I can feel kind of boxed in.
Yeah. All right. So what about like individuals, family members, friends? How can we support bisexual loved ones' mental health?
So, I mean, it shouldn't be tricky. Maybe just not making assumptions generally is the biggest thing we can do. But I think about ways that we might try to bond with people that can actually be really alienating, like inviting someone, for example, to a girls' night or a bachelorette party. And then I think about for folks in the queer community, even though, like I said, safe spaces are very important, stop gatekeeping who should belong unless someone's perpetuating a lot of harm. It's not useful. For straight people, like folks challenging themselves to expand their language. This is a big one, especially expanding their notions of what a successful life can look like. So not just following the expectations of straight, monogamous, nuclear family life cycle developmental milestones. Overall, don't make assumptions about someone's complexity or life based on who they're currently partnered with or not partnered with.
I really think gatekeeping is like a big problem in even the larger community, and even in like communities that aren't like, you know, like inborn identity based, if that makes sense, like LGBTQ, but even just like fan communities and stuff. And why do you think people gatekeep like that?
I mean, sometimes it comes from a place of superiority. Sometimes people have experienced a lot of exclusivity themselves, and they have a sense of scarcity about their own safe spaces. So there's a lot there. I was thinking not quite related to the fan community, but just representation. Like growing up, I think the only out bisexual person I like heard of on the larger scale was like Tila Tequila. So crushing.
Oh no, and she turned out to be a Nazi. Yikes.
She sure did. Terrible. Yeah.
That's not good representation, but it does seem like we have a lot more representation now, at least.
Yeah,
which is, I mean, probably good for mental health for the bisexual community too. One would hope. So, all right. So, does anyone have questions? We would love to answer them.
Please.
But it's also, yes.
Yeah, well, Susan brought it up before about the name of the Heart for Gay and Lesbian Health Collective. And I've kind of been nudging the Health Collective over the years of, hey,
yeah,
time to move on, you know, and I know it's an expense. I know there's legal fees. I know you gotta go through a lot. But that being said, from what I understand, and let me say, so Susan knows, I am a bi advocate in the sense that I work with the New Haven Pride Center with their bi programming. I've started my own group that meets every fourth Wednesday, so I'll be doing that at 7:30. And I did it because there wasn't anything around.
What's your group called, by the way?
Bi Plus Discussion Group.
Awesome.
And I'm out of Middletown. I have a church that is open and affirming, and they let me use their space.
Oh, that's wonderful.
So, yeah, so they let me run the group there, of course, resuming now. But, you know, it bothered me a few years ago when I found out, first off, that we had very high suicide rate. Because I have mental health problems too. I have depression that I've been fighting for years. I know, for years I thought I was lesbian because nobody talked about bisexuality. And I see that a lot too, that bi people kind of figure it out late because it's not talked about enough. And I think I felt robbed in a way of finding my identity because of that. Because I'm a little older, I'm hoping it's better for some of the younger people. But suicide happens a lot because of being excluded, this feeling of feeling excluded. And so I do have a concern about the Gay and Lesbian Health Collective, the name, because it is exclusive in a way. Now, it might be a subtitle that it's for the LGBT community. So,
oh, I'm sorry.
Well, I was just going to say, I know it costs money, and has the center actually gotten to a point where they're like, yes, we have to do that, because that's the last I heard from them. But I couldn't get a number. And if I got an actual number, it would tell me, okay, they're actually working on it because they know what it would cost.
So I am not really involved with the board personally, but as far as I've been told, the board does have it on their 2021 to-do list. I can, if you leave me your email address, get you in touch with Linda, who would definitely have more information on that. So if you'd like, you can either drop it in the chat or you can email me.
Yeah.
I'll put mine in there.
Yeah, I'll do that.
There you go.
I don't mind putting it in the chat.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, I appreciate your input on that. So yeah, feel free to email me. And also anybody who has questions can also feel free to email me as well.
Thanks for sharing your experiences and work in the community.
Yeah.
I actually, one of the little things I do is create a table that I do at Pride events. I haven't done a lot, but I've done some. Literally, I am giving away tchotchke, bi bracelets, bi pins, because when I went to Pride, I did not feel community at all. I'm like, where's my people? And that, this is supposed to be the inclusive place, and it wasn't.
Yeah.
So I've taken that upon myself. I am lucky to have some extra funds, and I just do this. I do my meetup group. I pay for this all out of my pocket because I think it's really, really important for
Yeah, no,
people.
that's awesome work you're
mental
doing.
health. Yeah.
Sort of being the change that you
Yeah.
want to see. Thank you for sharing that.
All right, so we are nearing the time. So I
Sure.
am just going to talk about my contact info, and then Sharon can talk about hers. So you can email me at kima@hglhc.org if you have any questions. You could also call us 860-278-4163. And yeah, so if you want to make an appointment for clinic, if you have sexual health questions, input, anything like that. And Sharon, how can people contact you if they have questions?
Yeah, you can email me. It's Sharon@curiositycounseling.com. Curiositycounseling.com is my website. Right now, I can't see clients whose permanent residence is in Connecticut, but I'm not currently taking new clients anyway. But I am really geeked to just talk about all things bisexual mental health. Or if you want to collaborate on any trainings in the future, that's something I am absolutely open to.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Sharon. It was really nice to talk to you.
Absolutely. Thanks for making this happen. This was great.
And thanks everybody for coming and checking it out.
Yeah. Thank
Have a
you.
good night.
Take care.